Welcome to Coffee Break with K.A. and Dana. We're brought to you by the Lesbian Talk Show. I'm K.A., a lesbian romance author, and in my past life, a counselor and a social worker.
And I'm Dana, an avid reader, coffee connoisseur, recovering alcoholic, and a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks.
Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and join us for a meaningful conversation from a lesbian perspective. Why is it that failure completely destroys some people, but not others? How can some land on their feet time and again, like phoenix rising from the ashes, while others don't? In this episode, we discuss strategies for surviving tough times. Won't you join us for a meaningful conversation? So, we read a 2009 article from Psychology Today titled Weathering the Storm. That's an oldie but a goodie. What'd you think?
I thought it was a great article. It was the first time that I had seen it. But he had some really good points in it that after I read them, it's like, well, duh.
Yes.
But I never had thought about them before.
Yeah. I mean, there was some of this that was common sense, but it was a thought-provoking article. So let's see if we can have a thoughtful conversation. All right. So we could just hop around. What hit me, and it's funny, he had good suggestions about how to survive tough times. But what hit me is what in 2009 this author had to say about Obama and Trump.
Yes.
I mean, so I don't know that that's where we're going today, totally, because we need to share some of the good stuff we learned. But I cannot resist sharing the Obama quote and the Trump quote. So this was 2009, and this author says about Obama, when you look at stories of great leaders, they almost all had major setbacks. That was the concern I had with Obama. I now think he'll make a great president. But the fact that he really hasn't had any major failures in his life means that he may not be as tempered, as challenged, as hardened. Okay, now that only really struck me after I came across the Trump one.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just wrap your head around this one and then let's take off. Okay, so here's the Trump quote. Not Trump quote, but quote about Trump. Is there just a kind of naive temperament, a Donald Trumpish optimism that some psychologists have described as enthusiasm and persistence in the face of setbacks? Something that helps some people find the kernel of good inside the bad and profit from it. That's either in play or it isn't. How can we learn to fail better? Okay, so Donald Trumpish optimism? Kernel of good inside the bad and profit from... Okay, so... Okay, that has nothing to do with surviving failure, but... Oh, how times have changed.
Yes. And I wonder if the person who wrote this, gentleman that wrote this article, if his mind has changed about his Trump dumphism.
It does make you... It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder what Bruce Grierson the author of this article we read from May of 2009 thinks today. Okay, so there's my political comment. I just couldn't hardly stand it.
You know, this article kind of reminds me of the talk that Pema Children gave at her granddaughter's graduation. It was called Fail, Fail Again, and Fail Better. And it's kind of the same thing, that it's only in failure that we can learn some of the lessons that we need to be truly human.
Well, yeah, and that's really what surviving tough times, weathering the storm, those that fail better. That's what really this was all about. It struck me, the article talked about kids a couple times, and what struck me is so true is how we do bubble wrap our kids, trying to as you know, parents in days past, decades past, you know, a kid did something, threw a snowball that was smashed in someone's forehead, whatever. In the 1950s, they were going to get it at school. I wasn't around in the 1950s. But it could have happened in the 60s too. They were going to get it at school. In fact, my wife tells a story of being marched to the principal's office for just that. Maybe not the forehead part, but the snowball, definitely.
I can't imagine your wife being in the principal's office.
Oh, yes. See, there's an ornery side that you just don't know about her. She used to carry snowballs in her pocket. And I don't think they were there because she was, overheated. I think they were useful, hardened little weapons. But anyway,
I'm sure. Anyway,
on that note, back in the day, your kid got in trouble and they're marched to the principal's office and they get it, and you get a note or somebody calls you or whatever as a parent. You don't rush in and say, "You touched my kid." They got it again when they got home.
Absolutely.
Now, I am not advocating, physical violence against children, but it does strike me that, consequences, failure at, sailing that snowball through the air without getting caught, and getting caught being the failure. Failure, whatever it is you're doing, if you're bubble wrapped and protected from the failure itself, then, this article and in Common Sense says it doesn't make you stronger.
Well, and we see that a lot nowadays with the kids when they get participation trophies or participation ribbons. And I think sometimes you just got to fail in order to learn, especially in our case with sports, because that's what all of our kids were in. There's something about losing that championship game that makes you a stronger human being.
Well, yes. And if you get meaningless, awards, if everybody gets one, they mean nothing.
Right.
But you're right. That struggle, determination to improve your skills, to do better than yourself last time, and maybe better than the other kid.
Well, and not only that, I think it gives you a little humility because you know what the kid you just beat feels like because you were just there. I especially saw this in my middle son, Andy, after they had lost the championship and then they came back the next year. He had a lot more humility towards the other team than some of the other members on his team that hadn't been there the years before.
Yeah, that's literally learning from failure. Learning how to
be a better human being.
Be a better human being. Feel for the other kid.
Right.
Which, Yeah, that just should be a required course. Somehow we need to figure out how to teach that.
Absolutely.
Because in a way, that's kind of, at least in our country, we're losing that. I just think we're losing that.
Absolutely.
But that's what this article is about. All the things you can do to fail better and end up growing from it. So let's just we've hit some of it. But one thing that struck me is that and this is so true, failure stirs up some of our most potent emotions. Humiliation, guilt, shame. I mean, that rock at the bottom of your stomach, there is nothing that takes hold and twists like failing at something that meant something.
Absolutely. And again, I think it goes back to a lot of how the parents handle it and how they perceive it. Yeah.
And we seem to be talking as much about more. We seem to be talking more about kids, but I mean that really applies to any age.
Right.
All of this applies to any age.
But if we can learn things as kids, it's much easier than trying to learn it as adults.
Yeah,
we can learn it, but it's a little bit more painful.
It is. I think the window they talked about is what? Teenage. It's most useful to you like teenage years to 30.
Yeah. Well, and in boys, I think that they're still kind of growing till 30. There was a quote on Facebook the other day, and it's very true. And it talks about, instead of asking why me did this happen, asking what am I supposed to learn from this happening. And I think as long as we can remember to do that, failure at any age isn't going to stifle you for long.
No, in fact, and this article quoted lots of psychologists and sociologists, but basically they were saying we should hope for more exposure to failure, fail early and often, which is like the opposite of the popular thought. So
right.
So really, what that does, I mean, if you really take this to heart, what it does is open the field up so that you can try new things, try things that you might fail at, because not only might that failure help you, but you might end up growing from something else, some unanticipated learning, or, it could even be a hobby. Just, some people don't try things because they're afraid to try new things for fear they'll fail.
Yeah, there was a great J.K. Rowling quote in here, and it talks about the perfect storm of failure: her broken marriage, disapproval from her parents, poverty that bordered on homelessness, that sent her back to her first dream of writing because she had nothing left to lose. Failure stripped away everything essential, she said. It taught me things about myself that I could not have learned in any other way.
Isn't that something? I mean,
wow.
Had she not fallen on her face, so to speak, we wouldn't have Harry Potter.
Well,
okay, so that was
J.K.
selfish.
Rowling.
That was a selfish thing to say, but I mean, think about that. She went from nothing to greatness, and had she not been at the bottom, she'd have never tried.
Right.
How sad, because a lot of people aren't quite at the bottom, but sometimes they don't have the courage to try.
Right. She had nothing else left but her writing. And you're right, we wouldn't have Harry Potter, which I believe changed how children perceive reading today.
Because yes.
Back in our day, we didn't have anything like Harry Potter to suck us in.
No, we had great books or whatever they were called.
Yeah, exactly. Dick and Jane play.
That's what I try to write. Great books. I'm sorry. Okay, back to the article.
You do write great books.
Back to the article. Okay,
Yeah.
so the other thing that struck me, and this is personally what I try to do. I mean, you can't always do it, but I try. But the other thing they talked about is the people who bounce back from failure the best are the ones who look at those failures with a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to lighten up a little bit. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take failure so seriously. Now, that's easier said than done. I'll give you that. But we can all improve maybe just a little.
Well, humor gets us through a lot of things that life throws at us. And those that have humor, I think, seem to be able to bounce back from them. You've got to have a good sense of humor in order to survive today. Because sometimes this shit is just funny.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that step beyond failure, you really need to tap in to your sense of humor to survive today. I mean, that is your quote of the day, I'll tell you. Because I'll tell you, these are stressful times.
Absolutely.
And failing stressful. So there you go. Lighten up.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that struck me, they mentioned this Facebook depression group in this, and how you always hear misery loves company, but there really is some value in it. And these online web-based groups, and maybe in-person groups too, I don't know whether their membership is growing, but these online support groups are growing. And it probably is good for you to be able to vent to other people.
But there becomes a problem when you just vent and there's no solution.
That's true. But what this article talked about was that after people vented for a while, they like vented themselves out. And all of a sudden, those people who were venting, they started posting things that were productive and positive to help people. So I guess the moral to the story, whine long enough, you'll come out the other side and help someone.
And I think we've talked about this before. When I first got sober, my sponsor would give me 5 minutes to whine. So, and then each week it would go down by a minute. So the next week I only had 4 minutes to whine. And that made me really sit down and think about what the real problems were in my life that I needed to get out there and what was just stupid shit.
Timed whining.
I still do it with my sponsees.
I was going to say that I can see you really getting into that. Timed whining.
Yep.
Now there is a parenting strategy. Now I'm going back to kids. Parenting strategy. That's really a pretty good idea. Timed whining, timed complaining.
Yep. Because it makes you think about what is really going on in your world and what's the stuff that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It goes back to Rule 62 in AA, which is don't take yourself so damn seriously.
Which is basically what this said too. Lighten up,
exactly.
You'll do better. But, yeah. And this article talked about it's okay to feel guilty, but don't feel shame about failure. And basically the difference being thinking about what you failed at versus thinking you're a bad person.
That's a hard one. That's really hard for me. I have a hard time with that distinction.
Well,
I'm learning.
I would imagine I do too, and I would imagine a lot of people do. Most everything that was suggested here seemed like a really good idea, and nothing seemed like it was in the bag already. Everything would require a little work for someone to do it, it had so much research behind it, which is kind of where I go when I look at suggestions, that I think some of it's worth trying. A couple others, cultivate optimism. We talked about that. Time you're complaining and whining and say something positive. I like this. Ask not what the world can do for you, the benefits of volunteering.
Right.
I mean, that was kind of good.
We call that perspective. When we go somewhere and volunteer and there are people there that have a lot less or need a lot more than we do, it also helps to put our life into a little perspective.
Well, it does. And it not only does that, but it picks you up. I mean, helping someone feels good.
Yeah. It gets you out of yourself.
You feel better and you help someone else. That's a good thing. Here's a good one. Failure kind of helps you scale down the expectations for yourself. Fail a couple times and those expectations become a little more realistic. Doable.
And exactly. Doable. Because sometimes we have great expectations of ourselves and there's no way we can reach them.
Yeah, that's true. And
I mean, very few authors have wrote a bestseller right out of the gate.
And yet, when an author writes a book, as they're writing it, every single one of them, that's where they see it going.
Right.
I think anytime you create something, you think, oh boy, this is better than I did last time. And then you realize that it isn't, and you go on.
It's the same with my woodworking. I worked on a piece for probably 20 hours, and I was just about to finish it, and I messed it up. And it was like, well, shit, now what? Do I try and fix it, or do I just leave it? And I just left it. Well, I hope to do better next time and finish it. Another one perfect.
Could it have been one of those situations where your expectations were too high and maybe it was good?
It was all right, but my expectations were for me to finish it perfectly, and that's never going to happen. I'm not perfect, so I can't finish anything perfectly.
No one is. No one is. All right, so we have had a great discussion, and I can't resist ending on the last point of this article. Failure is an opportunity to change course. Seize it. Until next week, my friend.
Have a good one.
You've been listening to Coffee Break with Kay and Dana. Meaningful conversations from a lesbian perspective were brought to you by the Lesbian Talk Show. Listen to us on Podbean and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Until next week, be kind to one another, work hard, and watch amazing things happen in your corner of the world.